What happens when survival turns into something far deeper than fear, and two enemies must face a truth neither of them expected? Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The relentless Texas sun beat down on Sarah Miller's face as she stood on the porch of her family's modest homestead. At 22, she had grown accustomed to the harsh realities of frontier life. Her father, Thomas Miller, had moved their family from Boston 5 years earlier with dreams of prosperity in the untamed West. "Sarah, would you fetch some water from the well?" her mother called from inside. "Yes, mother," Sarah replied, wiping perspiration from her brow. The summer of 1853 had been particularly unforgiving, with drought threatening their crops and tensions with neighboring Comanche tribes escalating by the day. Sarah grabbed the wooden bucket and made her way to the well, her calico dress swaying gently in the hot breeze. As she drew water, a distant cloud of dust caught her attention. Riders approaching, fast. Her heart quickened. Father and her brother James weren't due back from town until tomorrow. "Mother," Sarah called, alarm rising in her voice. "Riders coming!" Elizabeth Miller emerged from the cabin, shielding her eyes from the sun. Her face paled. "Get inside, Sarah, now." They barely made it to the door when the thunder of hooves surrounded the homestead. A dozen Comanche warriors circled their cabin, their faces painted for war. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized the leader, Black Hawk, a warrior known for his ruthlessness along the frontier. "What do they want?" Sarah whispered, trembling as her mother pushed her behind the door. "I don't know," Elizabeth answered, her voice quivering as she reached for her husband's shotgun. The door splintered open before they could secure it. Two warriors burst in, their dark eyes scanning the room. Sarah screamed as one grabbed her arm, dragging her outside while another subdued her mother. "Please," Sarah begged, struggling against her captor's iron grip. "Take what you want, but leave us be." Outside, Blackhawk dismounted his painted stallion, approaching Sarah with calculating eyes. He spoke to his men in their native tongue, gesturing toward her. The warriors laughed. "Your father killed 2 of our hunters," Blackhawk said in broken English. "Now we take payment." Sarah's heart sank as realization dawned. Her father, always quick to defend their land, must have encountered Comanche hunters near their property. Now they had come for retribution. "My father is a fair man," Sarah pleaded. "Whatever happened, we can resolve this peacefully." Blackhawk's expression remained impassive. "No peace now. You come with us." As the warriors ransacked their home, Sarah watched helplessly as her mother fought against her captors. "Leave my daughter alone," Elizabeth cried out. A warrior struck Elizabeth, sending her crumbling to the ground. Sarah screamed and lunged toward her mother, but strong hands restrained her. Among the warriors, one man stood slightly apart, tall and powerfully built, with a stern face framed by 2 long braids. He watched the scene with stoic detachment. Unlike the others, he wore no war paint, only a necklace of bear claws and a single eagle feather in his hair. His eyes met Sarah's for a brief moment, dark, unreadable, yet somehow different from the others. "Strong Wind," Blackhawk called to him in Comanche. "This woman is yours. Payment for the horses you provided." The warrior called Strong Wind approached, studying Sarah with an inscrutable expression. She stiffened, defiance masking her terror. "I will never be anyone's property," she spat, struggling against her captors. Strong Wind didn't respond. Instead, he turned to Blackhawk. "I accept," he said simply in Comanche. As they bound her wrists and forced her onto a horse, Sarah caught a final glimpse of her mother, lying motionless on the ground. Tears blinded her as the warriors rode away, taking her from everything she had ever known. They rode hard for hours, deep into Comanche territory, where few white settlers had ever ventured and returned to tell the tale. Sarah's mind raced between terror and determination to survive. She noticed that Strong Wind rode close beside her, occasionally steadying her when she nearly fell from exhaustion. By nightfall, they reached a Comanche encampment nestled in a hidden valley. Tepees dotted the landscape, and fires burned against the darkening sky. Women and children emerged to greet the returning warriors, their curious eyes falling on the white woman in their midst. Blackhawk announced their arrival with triumphant calls, displaying items looted from the Miller homestead. Sarah was pulled from her horse, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. Strong Wind dismounted and approached her. Up close, Sarah could see scars on his face and arms, testament to a life of warfare, yet his eyes held something she hadn't expected. Not cruelty, but a deep, guarded weariness. "You belong to my lodge now," he said in surprisingly clear English. "Follow me." Too exhausted to resist, Sarah followed him to a large teepee set slightly apart from the others. Inside, furs lined the ground, and various weapons hung from the center poles. A small fire burned in the middle, tended by an elderly woman who regarded Sarah with open suspicion. "Grandmother," Strong Wind addressed the woman in Comanche. "This is the white woman. She will stay with us now." The old woman snorted disapprovingly but continued her work without comment. "You speak English well," Sarah said, her voice hoarse from crying and thirst. Strong Wind handed her a water skin. "I traded with whites before the troubles began. Learned their words." "My name is Sarah Miller," she said, clinging to this small piece of her identity. Strong Wind nodded once. "Here you are simply white woman until you earn a Comanche name. Rest now. Tomorrow begins your new life." As Sarah sank onto the furs, exhaustion finally overcame fear. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was of her mother's face, and a silent promise. Somehow she would find her way back home. Days blended into weeks as Sarah adjusted to life in the Comanche camp. Every morning she woke before dawn to help Strong Wind's grandmother, whom she learned was called Many Moons, with the daily chores. The old woman rarely spoke but taught through demonstration how to prepare meals, tan hides, and gather edible plants from the surrounding wilderness. Strong Wind remained an enigma. He left each morning to hunt or patrol with other warriors and returned at dusk, sometimes with game, sometimes empty-handed, but always silent. He treated Sarah not with cruelty, but with a distant indifference that somehow felt more isolating than outright hostility. One evening, as Sarah sat outside the teepee watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and crimson, Strong Wind approached and sat beside her, breaking his usual silence. "You work hard," he observed. "Many Moons says you learn quickly." Sarah looked at him, surprised by the compliment. "I have no choice." "There is always choice," he replied. "Some captives refuse to eat. They die. Some fight every day until they are beaten. You adapt, you survive." "I'm waiting," Sarah said, meeting his gaze directly. "For what?" "For a chance to return to my people." Strong Wind's expression hardened. "You are with your people now. The sooner you accept this, the easier your life will be." Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. "Why did you take me? What did my family ever do to yours?" For a long moment, Strong Wind stared across the valley. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight Sarah hadn't heard before. 3 winters ago, I had a wife. She was called Willow Woman. She was heavy with child when white settlers attacked our hunting camp." His jaw tightened. "They killed everyone while the men were away tracking buffalo. When we returned, we found them. My wife had been scalped." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "I'm sorry for your loss, but my family never—" "All white eyes are the same," he interrupted. "They take our land, kill our buffalo, break their treaties. Your father built his home on sacred hunting grounds. He was warned. So I'm payment for perceived wrongs," Sarah said bitterly. Strong Wind turned to her. "You are alive. Many would not have granted you that mercy." Before Sarah could respond, shouting erupted from the center of the camp. Warriors rushed toward the commotion, Strong Wind among them. Sarah followed at a distance, curiosity overcoming caution. A band of warriors had returned, leading 3 captive men in tattered army uniforms. One of the soldiers, barely more than a boy with sandy hair and frightened eyes, caught sight of Sarah. "Miss, are you American?" he called out desperately. Before Sarah could respond, a warrior struck the young soldier, knocking him to the ground. Blackhawk appeared, surveying the captives with contempt. "Scouts!" Blackhawk announced to the gathered tribe. "Army comes to our territory. These men will tell us their plans." Sarah watched in horror as the soldiers were dragged toward the council fire. Strong Wind noticed her expression and moved to block her view. "Go back to the lodge," he ordered. "What will happen to them?" Sarah asked, already knowing the answer. "War's coming," Strong Wind replied. "Go now." That night, Sarah lay awake, the soldiers' fate weighing heavily on her mind. Outside, she could hear the camp preparing for conflict. weapons being sharpened, warriors chanting war songs. She thought of the young soldier and wondered if he had a family waiting for his return, just as her father and brother must be searching for her. Before dawn, she slipped out of the teepee. The camp was quiet except for a few guards. Sarah crept toward the edge of the encampment where she had seen the prisoners tied. Only the young soldier remained, bound to a post, his face bloodied but his eyes alert. "Miss," he whispered when he saw her. "Thank God." "Quiet," Sarah warned, glancing nervously around. "What's your name?" "Private Thomas Jenkins, 7th Cavalry," he replied. "They killed the others. You've got to help me." Sarah knelt beside him, working at his bonds. "I'm a captive too. My name is Sarah Miller." "Miller?" Jenkins's eyes widened. "From the homestead near Cottonwood Creek? Your father's been searching everywhere for you. There's a patrol camp 10 miles east of here, led by Captain Wallace." Hope surged through Sarah. "My father? Is he alive? And my mother?" "Your father's with the patrol. I don't know about your mother. Please hurry." The ropes were tight, but Sarah managed to loosen them. As Jenkins pulled free, a voice spoke from the darkness behind them. "I thought you were smarter than this." Sarah froze, then slowly turned to face Strong Wind, who stood with his arms crossed, disappointment evident in his features. "He's just a boy," Sarah pleaded. "They'll kill him. And now they will punish you both," Strong Wind replied, his voice low and dangerous. Jenkins lunged suddenly, tackling Strong Wind to the ground. "Run, Miss Miller," he shouted. "East toward the river." Sarah hesitated only a moment before sprinting toward the darkness beyond the camp. Behind her, she heard the sounds of struggle, then silence, then an alarm being raised. Warriors emerged from their lodges, shouting and pointing as she fled. She ran blindly through the unfamiliar terrain, her heart pounding in her ears. The first light of dawn illuminated the rocky landscape enough for her to see the path ahead. She heard horses behind her and pushed herself harder, knowing capture would mean severe punishment, possibly death. Suddenly, a lasso dropped over her shoulders, yanking her backward onto the hard ground. She cried out in pain as she was dragged several feet before coming to a stop. Looking up, she saw Strong Wind on horseback, the other end of the rope in his hand, his expression thunderous. He dismounted and approached her as she struggled against the rope. "Foolish woman," he said, pulling her roughly to her feet. "You risk everything for a stranger." "He's an innocent boy." Sarah shot back, defiant despite her fear. "There are no innocents in war," Strong Wind replied. He glanced over his shoulder. "Black Hawk and the others are coming. They will demand your life for this treachery." Sarah's defiance faltered as terror took hold. "Then why did you come alone? Why not let them catch me?" Something flickered in Strong Wind's eyes. Conflict, perhaps even concern. Without answering, he pulled her close and lifted her onto his horse, mounting behind her. "What are you doing?" she asked, confused. "Making a choice," he replied, turning his horse away from the direction of the pursuing warriors and spurring it into a gallop. They rode hard through the dawn light, Strong Wind's arm tight around Sarah's waist as they navigated treacherous ravines and dense thickets. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit gradually faded, but Strong Wind didn't slow their pace. "Where are you taking me?" Sarah finally asked when they paused to rest the horse near a small stream. Strong Wind dismounted and helped her down. "Away from Black Hawk's justice." "Why? Why would you betray your people for me?" Strong Wind's expression hardened. "I do not betray my people. I follow my own path." He knelt to drink from the stream. "The young soldier is dead. He fought bravely but could not overcome me." Sarah felt grief wash over her. Another life lost in this senseless conflict. "And now we're both outcasts." "Yes," Strong Wind acknowledged. "We cannot return to my people, and I cannot take you to yours. The army would shoot me on sight." "So what now?" Sarah asked, reality setting in. Strong Wind stood, water dripping from his chin. "Now we survive. Together." For 3 days, Strong Wind and Sarah traveled northward, keeping to ravines and forests to avoid detection. They spoke little, conserving energy for the difficult journey. Sarah noticed that Strong Wind chose paths that concealed their tracks and frequently doubled back to ensure they weren't followed. On the 4th morning, they crested a ridge overlooking a secluded valley. A small cabin stood near a clear stream, partially hidden by towering pines. "What is this place?" Sarah asked, surprised to see a structure so far from any settlement. "A trading post once," Strong Wind replied, "built by a French trapper who died 2 winters ago. Few know of its existence." They approached cautiously. The cabin was weathered but sound, with a stone fireplace and sturdy walls. Inside, dust covered the sparse furnishings: a rough-hewn table, a bed frame without bedding, shelves lined with forgotten supplies. "We will stay here," Strong Wind decided, surveying the space, "at least until winter passes." Sarah ran her fingers along the table's surface, leaving trails in the dust. A cabin, with walls and a roof. After weeks in a teepee, it felt strangely familiar yet foreign. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, the question that had burned within her since their escape. Strong Wind set down his weapons and faced her. "I do not know," he admitted. "Perhaps because you remind me that not all choices are made by hatred." They spent the day making the cabin habitable. Strong Wind hunted a deer while Sarah cleaned years of dust and debris from the interior. By nightfall, a fire crackled in the fireplace and fresh pine boughs covered the bed frame. As they ate venison in the firelight, Sarah studied Strong Wind's profile. Away from his tribe, he seemed different, less guarded, though no less vigilant. "You could have let me go," she said finally. "You could have pointed me toward the army patrol and returned to your people with a story of how I died." Strong Wind poked at the fire. "Black Hawk would not have believed me. He would have demanded proof." He paused. "And I did not wish to lie. So instead you chose exile. I chose to follow the path the spirit set before me." He looked up at her. "My father was a wise man. He taught me that vengeance brings only more death. I lost sight of his teachings after Willow Woman died." Sarah set down her plate. "I truly am sorry for what happened to your wife, and I understand your anger. But not all white settlers are the same, just as not all Comanche are raiders." Strong Wind nodded slowly. "This is a truth I am beginning to see." They fell into a routine over the following weeks. Strong Wind taught Sarah to hunt with a bow, to read animal tracks, and to move silently through the forest. In return, she showed him how to repair the cabin's leaky roof and how to make bread from the stored flour they discovered in a root cellar. One evening, as early snow dusted the ground outside, Strong Wind returned from hunting with a wild turkey and something else, a small leather-bound book. "I found this by the stream," he said, handing it to her. The writing of white eyes. Sarah took the book with trembling hands. It had been months since she'd held anything written. Opening it, she discovered it was a journal, its pages filled with observations about the local flora and fauna, written in a neat hand. "It belonged to the trapper who lived here," she said, turning the pages carefully. "Listen to this. The Comanche who trade with me are fierce but fair. Unlike what many believe, they are not savages but a proud people fighting to preserve their way of life." Strong Wind sat beside her, his shoulder touching hers as he looked at the unfamiliar markings on the page. "What else does it say?" he asked. Sarah read aloud from the journal each night thereafter, translating the French trapper's words about the land, the changing seasons, and his interactions with various native tribes. Strong Wind listened intently, sometimes asking questions, sometimes sharing his own knowledge of the topics discussed. These quiet evenings brought them closer, building a bridge between their vastly different worlds. Sarah began to see Strong Wind not as her captor, but as a man of principle and depth. For his part, Strong Wind's rigid beliefs about white settlers softened as he came to know Sarah, her resilience, her compassion, and her willingness to adapt without surrendering her identity. One night, as a blizzard howled outside, Strong Wind recounted Comanche legends while they sat wrapped in buffalo robes before the fire. Sarah watched his face, animated in a way she'd never seen before, as he described how coyotes stole fire to give to the people. "Your stories are beautiful," she said when he finished. "They remind me of the Bible stories my mother taught me." "Tell me one," he requested, settling back against the wall. Sarah thought for a moment, then began relating the story of Noah and the Great Flood. Strong Wind listened attentively, nodding at certain parts. "My people have a similar story," he said when she finished, "of a time when water covered all the land, and how Turtle offered his back for the people to stand upon. It seems our ancestors understood the same truths, just expressed differently," Sarah observed. Strong Wind reached out slowly, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was gentle, tentative, so unlike the fierce warrior she had first known. "I was wrong about many things," he said quietly. "The hatred I carried blinded me." Sarah's heart quickened. "We've both learned much since that day you took me from my home. Do you still think of escape?" he asked. Sarah hesitated, the question more complex than it once would have been. "I think of my father and brother. I wonder if my mother survived. I would give anything to know they're safe." Strong Wind nodded. "When spring comes, I will help you find them." "And what will become of you?" Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. "That is for the spirits to decide." As winter deepened, their companionship blossomed into something neither had anticipated. They were no longer captor and captive, but two souls finding unexpected connection amid circumstances beyond their control. One morning, after a particularly heavy snowfall, Sarah woke to find Strong Wind already gone from the cabin. Footprints led toward the stream, now frozen solid. She followed them, wrapped in a fur cloak, and found him standing motionless, staring at something in the distance. "What is it?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. "Riders," he replied tensely. "Many of them." Sarah squinted against the bright snow and saw what he had spotted. A line of horsemen moving along the valley's edge, perhaps a mile away. "Comanche?" she asked, fear rising. Strong Wind shook his head. "Cavalry." Sarah's heart leapt. "My father could be with them. Or they could be a patrol hunting for Comanche," Strong Wind countered. "Either way, it brings danger." They retreated to the cabin, watching from the window as the cavalry column moved slowly through the distant trees. Sarah felt torn between hope of rescue and concern for Strong Wind's safety. "You should go to them," Strong Wind said finally, his voice flat. "Tell them you escaped from captivity. Do not mention me or this place. And leave you here alone?" Sarah turned to him, distressed. "They're searching these hills. They'll find you eventually. Then I will move on." "No," Sarah said firmly. "There must be another way. My father is a reasonable man. If I explain—" "Explain what?" Strong Wind's voice hardened. "That you now defend the man who took you from your family? They will say I have bewitched you. That is what white men always say when their women choose to stay with Indians." Sarah fell silent, recognizing the truth in his words. But something else he said echoed in her mind. "Is that what I've done?" she asked quietly. "Chosen to stay with you?" Strong Wind's expression softened. "Have you?" Before she could answer, the distant sound of gunfire erupted from the far end of the valley. They rushed to the window to see the cavalry engaged with mounted warriors who had emerged from the forest. "Black Hawk," Strong Wind confirmed grimly. "He has been tracking us all this time." The battle moved closer to the cabin as both sides maneuvered through the snowy terrain. Sarah and Strong Wind gathered their few possessions, preparing to flee, but it was too late. A group of soldiers had broken away from the main force and was approaching the cabin, while Comanche warriors circled to intercept them. "We're caught between them," Sarah realized in horror. Strong Wind pulled her close. "Whatever happens, know that my heart sees you not as enemy, but as the woman who taught me to look beyond hatred." The door burst open as both soldiers and warriors converged on the cabin simultaneously. "Hold your fire," a commanding voice shouted as soldiers and warriors filled the small cabin, weapons trained on each other. Sarah clutched Strong Wind's arm, her eyes frantically scanning the faces before her. And then she saw him. Her father, Thomas Miller, older and more weathered than she remembered, pushing his way through the soldiers. "Sarah," he gasped, disbelief etched across his features. "Father," she cried, moving toward him but stopping when a Comanche warrior, Black Hawk himself, stepped between them, his rifle aimed at Thomas. "The woman belongs to Strong Wind," Black Hawk declared in broken English, "and Strong Wind is traitor. Both must die." "The hell she belongs to anyone," Thomas growled, his own rifle unwavering. "That's my daughter you stole, you murderous devil." The cabin hummed with tension as a dozen firearms remained pointed in all directions. Strong Wind slowly raised his empty hands. "I wish no more bloodshed," he announced clearly. "Too many have died already." An officer in a cavalry uniform stepped forward. "I'm Captain Wallace, 7th Cavalry. We've been tracking this Comanche band for weeks after they raided 3 settlements." His cold eyes fixed on Strong Wind. This one of your raiders, Blackhawk? Before Blackhawk could answer, Sarah moved to Strong Wind's side. No, he saved me. He's not like the others. Saved you? Thomas looked bewildered. Sarah, these savages killed your mother and took you captive. Sarah felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her feet. Mother is dead? Thomas's face crumpled. We found her when we returned from town. The homestead was burned. We've been searching for you ever since. Grief crashed over Sarah like a physical blow. Strong Wind steadied her as she swayed, his touch gentle despite the weapons trained on him. I am sorry for your mother, he said quietly. I did not know. Blackhawk spat on the floor. Strong Wind grows soft, betrays his people for white woman. Enough, Captain Wallace barked. Miller, take your daughter. We're arresting these Comanche. They'll stand trial for the raids. Trial? Blackhawk laughed harshly. White man's justice is bullet or rope. And Comanche justice? Strong Wind challenged, facing his former chief. Is it any different? You raid and kill out of hatred, not necessity. You dare speak of honor? Blackhawk snarled. You who runs with a white captive? Sarah straightened, finding her voice despite her grief. I'm not a captive anymore. Strong Wind could have returned me at any time. He chose not to out of fear for my safety, and his. Thomas looked between his daughter and the tall Comanche warrior, confusion evident. Sarah, what are you saying? I'm saying there's been enough hatred, she replied firmly. Strong Wind taught me that. He lost his wife to settlers' violence. You lost mother to Comanche raids. When does it end? A tense silence filled the cabin. Outside, the sounds of battle had ceased, suggesting the remaining warriors and soldiers had reached a similar standoff. Captain Wallace finally broke the silence. Mr. Miller, I suggest you take your daughter outside while we deal with these hostiles. No, Sarah protested. If you harm him, you'll have to go through me first. Strong Wind placed a hand on her shoulder. Sarah, he said softly, go with your father. This is not your fight. It became my fight the day you took me, she replied, then turned to her father. Dad, please. Strong Wind is different. He protected me. He taught me to survive. And in time, we found something neither of us expected. Thomas studied his daughter's face, seeing the determination there, the same stubborn resolve her mother had possessed. He turned to Captain Wallace. Captain, I've ridden with your patrol for months with one goal, finding my daughter. Now that I have, I intend to honor her wishes. Wallace frowned. These Comanche have killed dozens of settlers. This one hasn't, Sarah insisted, pointing to Strong Wind. He left his people rather than continue the cycle of violence. Blackhawk laughed bitterly. Strong Wind was once greatest warrior. Now he is nothing. No, Strong Wind replied calmly. Now I am more than a warrior. I have seen beyond hatred to what could be. He addressed Captain Wallace directly. I will help you track Blackhawk's band if you wish, but I ask for peace between myself and this family. Wallace seemed taken aback by the offer. You would betray your own people? They ceased to be my people when they chose endless war over survival. Strong Wind answered. The old ways are dying. The buffalo vanish. The white settlements grow. We must find a new path or perish. A murmur ran through both groups of men. Sarah watched as her father's expression shifted from hostility to grudging consideration. Sarah, Thomas said, are you certain about this man? She nodded. More certain than I've ever been about anything. Thomas sighed deeply, then addressed the captain. My quarrel was never with all Comanche, only those who took my Sarah and killed my Elizabeth. If my daughter vouches for this man, that's good enough for me. Captain Wallace deliberated, clearly torn between military duty and the human drama unfolding before him. What about the others? He asked, gesturing to Blackhawk and his warriors. They must answer for the raids, Thomas said firmly. But this one, Strong Wind, has earned a chance to prove himself. Blackhawk spat again. Strong Wind is dead to us. Let him live with the shame of betrayal. The standoff gradually dissolved as the soldiers took Blackhawk and his warriors into custody. Strong Wind was permitted to remain unbound, though under watch. As the unlikely group prepared to leave the cabin, Sarah found a moment alone with him near the fireplace that had witnessed their transformation from enemies to something much more profound. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Strong Wind looked toward the window where early spring sunlight had begun to melt the snow. I do not know. My path is unclear. Come with us, Sarah urged. Father will need help rebuilding the homestead. You know I can't return to the Comanche, but you could find a place among my people. As what? Strong Wind asked. A curiosity, a tamed savage. Sarah took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. As a man who chose peace over vengeance, as someone who belongs with me. When they emerged from the cabin, Thomas was waiting, his expression guarded but no longer hostile. Captain Wallace wants to move out before dark, he said. He's agreed to let Strong Wind ride with us unbound on my word. Thank you, Father, Sarah said, relief evident in her voice. Thomas nodded stiffly. Your mother would have wanted me to trust your judgment. But, he added, looking directly at Strong Wind, I'll be watching you. You harm my daughter in any way and our truce ends. I would sooner harm myself, Strong Wind replied solemnly. The journey back to the settlements took nearly 2 weeks. During that time, Sarah watched as her father and Strong Wind cautiously circled each other, initially speaking only when necessary, but gradually finding common ground in their knowledge of the land and their shared concern for her welfare. Captain Wallace, true to his word, delivered Black Hawk and his warriors to Fort Richardson to await trial, while permitting Strong Wind to continue with the Millers. The captain had been impressed by Strong Wind's detailed knowledge of Comanche movements, which he had freely shared to prevent further bloodshed. When they finally reached the charred remains of the Miller homestead, Sarah felt a pang of grief for her mother and the life they had once known. Thomas stood silently beside her, his hat in his hands. We'll rebuild, he said after a long moment. Better than before. Strong Wind surveyed the blackened timbers and overgrown fields. This is good land. With work, it will provide again. Thomas eyed him speculatively. You know much about farming? I know about the seasons, the weather, the animals, Strong Wind replied. I can learn the rest. Over the following months, that's exactly what happened. The Miller homestead rose from the ashes, a new cabin, larger than before, with room for all. Thomas's initial suspicion of Strong Wind gradually gave way to respect, as the former warrior proved himself tireless in his efforts to help rebuild. Word spread about the unusual arrangement, and not all reactions were positive. Some neighbors refused to have anything to do with the Millers after Strong Wind's arrival. Others, however, were curious enough to visit, particularly after hearing how he had helped the cavalry track hostile bands. For Sarah and Strong Wind, the transition was not without challenges. The cultural divide between them sometimes seemed as vast as the Texas sky. Yet each day brought new understanding, new compromises, new bridges between their worlds. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the new cabin watching the sunset, Sarah's brother James rode up, returning from a supply run to town. Brought something for you, he called to Strong Wind, tossing him a small package. Strong Wind unwrapped it to find a leather-bound journal, similar to the one they had found in the trapper's cabin. Sarah mentioned you were interested in writing, James explained, dismounting. Thought you might like to keep your own record. Strong Wind ran his fingers over the blank pages. I have much to learn still. Sarah's a good teacher, James replied with a smile. The young man had been the quickest to accept Strong Wind, perhaps because he hadn't witnessed the initial violence of the raid. Later, as darkness fell and James and Thomas retired for the night, Sarah and Strong Wind remained on the porch, her head resting against his shoulder. Will you miss your people? She asked quietly. Strong Wind considered the question. I will miss the old ways, the ceremonies, the stories, but the path I walked with them led only to more suffering. He turned to face her. You asked me once why I helped you escape. I think I finally know the answer. And what is it? Sarah prompted when he fell silent. My grandfather once told me that the greatest warriors know when to set down their weapons. That true strength comes not from defeating enemies but from making allies. He took her hand in his. You helped me find that strength. Sarah smiled, her heart full. And you helped me find courage I never knew I had. As stars appeared in the vast Texas sky, they sat together in comfortable silence. Two people from different worlds who had discovered that understanding could overcome hatred, that healing could follow loss, and that love could grow in the most unlikely soil. In the distance, coyotes called to one another, neither Comanche nor settler, simply creatures of the land they all shared. Strong wind listened to their song, and for the first time since Willow Woman's death, felt truly at peace. "Tomorrow," he said, "I will begin writing our story in this book, so others may learn what we have learned." Sarah squeezed his hand. "That some bridges can never be burned. They can only be built stronger.